Of all the poems and soul-bearing songs that I have encountered this year, none have impacted me as much as a single line of graffiti on a wall. Kama shavarim nishma ad shenishma tekiah gadola. How many cries of shavarim, the broken sounds of the shofar, must we hear before we hear the great blast of tekiah gadola? This simple question encapsulates a deep yearning many of us share. How much brokenness must we endure before we achieve wholeness? How fractured must our world become before we reach a nechemta, that moment of true consolation? We live in a time of mashber, a word that in Hebrew shares the Hebrew root as shivarim, those broken notes of the shofar. Our community, our nation, our world seem irreparably shattered, divided by ideologies, misunderstandings, and fear. But how do we rise from these broken cries to the unified blast of Tekiah Gedolah? At the heart of our divisions lies a psychological phenomenon known as naive realism, the belief that what we see in the world is as it truly is, objectively and without bias. Dr. Eli Finkel, a social psychologist and founding co-director for the Center of Enlightened Disagreement, outlines 3 pillars of naive realism. Number 1, I perceive things accurately. Number 2, other fair-minded people would share my views if armed with those same facts. Number 3, if others deviate from my views despite having those facts, they are biased, stupid, or evil. This is real. This mindset convinces us that our perspective is the only correct one. Economist Joan Robinson once said, "Ideology is like breath. You never smell your own." Naive realism rests on the idea that there is an objective reality accessible to us, leading us to dismiss conflicting perspectives as uninformed or malicious. We then seek out news outlets and social media that would then confirm those biases, further solidifying our views. As Dr. Noor Katele says, our belief systems shape what rises to the level of our attention in the first place. We bring ideological blinkers that skew what stands out to us and ignore what doesn't. This blindness becomes dangerous when it fuels what researchers call out-party hatred, the animosity we feel towards those who disagree with us. Studies show that today, out-party hatred has surpassed in-group loyalty. People are more motivated by contempt for the other side than by support of their own. I'm going to take us to the events. This is not to be political, I promise. This is informational. To the events of January 6th of 2021. Everyone saw the very same footage, those same images of the Capitol. Yet Republicans and Democrats reached radically different conclusions about what happened, each group adjusting its belief thresholds to fit its narrative. In fact, it has been shown that both sides drastically overestimate the extent to which the other side dehumanizes them by as much as 300%. We've stopped engaging with real people and are instead battling caricatures in our mind. The root of our political tension isn't those issues themselves, but the partisan animosity that leads us to demonize and mistrust one another. If we want to move past the brokenness of this moment, we must find ways to see each other clearly. This doesn't mean that all opinions are equally valid, but it does mean understanding opposing views before arguing against them. If we're going to fight, we should fight over real issues, with humanity of the other in mind. So how do we move from Shivarim to Tekiah Gedolah? First, we must shift our goal. What if instead of trying to win, we aimed to understand? Conversations would transform from battles into opportunities for connection. Listening without judgment can create space for real dialogue, even when we don't agree. The goal is not to win an argument, but to maintain relationships. We must create safe spaces for honest dialogue. Jewish tradition, of course, offers guidance. Consider the debates we often hear about between the schools of Hillel and Shammai. Though they often disagreed, sometimes vehemently, the Talmud tells us these and these, both of these, are the words of the living God. Even though the law usually followed Hillel, Hillel always acknowledged Shammai's perspective with respect. Again, it teaches us the importance of truly understanding other perspectives before arguing against them. Just as Hillel listened to Shammai's views, we too must listen to the broken cries of Shevarim in our community before we can reach the Tekiyah Gedolah of unity. We have a tradition of keeping doors open. This tradition carries a profound lesson for our current challenges. Just as we keep the door open for Elijah during the Passover Seder, we must keep our hearts and our minds open to those with whom we disagree, especially within our own families and our own communities. Elijah's arrival is said to bring about peace and reconciliation, and in that spirit, we must make room for healing conversations. I've spoken with parents who have been heartbroken to discover that their children hold anti-Zionist views. I've talked with young people who feel unprepared and afraid to engage in conversations about Israel. To those struggling with these conversations, I offer this advice: keep that door open. Remember, it is not about winning an argument. It is about maintaining a relationship. Choose your battles wisely. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen without judgment, creating the space for honest dialogue to flourish. Now, there are some concrete steps that we can take to create a productive environment for dialogue, and I'll give you a few suggestions. The first is to focus on understanding and not winning. Approach conversations with genuine curiosity. 2, create safe spaces for dialogue. Encourage respectful discussions where all viewpoints are respected, even if not agreed with. 3, practice active listening. Hear what others are saying without formulating an immediate rebuttal. And 4, acknowledge complexity. Many issues, especially regarding Israel, are multifaceted. As Mordechai Kaplan once noted, unity isn't uniformity. We can stay united as a community while facing this enormous moment in both the Jewish and American story. As we approach what many are calling the most important election of our lives, the polarization surrounding Israel mirrors the division in American politics. Jewish values call us to engage in the democratic process with wisdom and compassion. There are ways that we can bring our Jewish principles into civic engagement. 1, seek accurate information. Challenge assumptions. Step outside the echo chambers. 2, exchange in respectful dialogue. If you're going to discuss hot-button issues, do so with an open mind. Vote according to your values. Make choices aligned with justice, compassion, and tikkun olam as you understand them. Maintain community bonds. Our shared identity as Jews transcends our political differences. The Torah offers us another way, reconciliation, one we're thinking about a lot today. When Abraham died, both Ishmael and Isaac, who we heard about last time, long estranged, they came together to bury their father. That moment symbolizes the hope that even long-standing divisions can still be healed. Isaac and Ishmael represent the possibility of coming together after estrangement, and their story reminds us that healing is always possible, even when it seems out of reach. So how do we move from Shevarim to Tekiah Gedolah. By not giving up hope, challenging our assumptions, practicing empathy, and seeking common ground. Our tradition teaches that healing comes not just personal reflection, but it comes through reconciliation. As we have now entered into Yom Kippur, let us remember that every time we open our hearts to listen, challenge our biases, and choose understanding over vilification, we move closer to that Tekiah Gedolah, that great blast of unity and wholeness. And when we do, we will not only hear the unified blast, but also begin to feel nechemta, the true consolation that comes from healing divisions, building bridges, and restoring our shared humanity. Just as the broken shivarim ultimately lead to the great Tekiah Gedolah, so too does our journey through brokenness lead us to the promise of nechemta. May this be a year we move from shivarim to Tekiah Gedolah, from brokenness to nechemta. Let us not give up hope, but look to the end of Isaac and Ishmael's story, which teaches us the power of reconciliation. May we find the strength to listen, the courage to understand, and the wisdom to build bridges where walls once stood. And as we do, may we hear the Tekiah Gedolah, the sound of unity and peace, and find our true nechemta, our true nachama, comfort, in the work of healing and repair. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.